I know Kung Fu.
Show me.
You are the new student. Come closer.
You're listening to the Kung Fu Podcast presented by James Still.
I don't care if it's Muhammad, Imard, Bruce Lee.
And Steve Newby.
This is the original Five Fingers of Death right here.
But my hands are registered as lethal weapons. That means we get into a fight, I accidentally kill you, I go to jail.
Okay, so we're going. Are we? Are we going?
Are we on?
Oh, I think so. I've got the levels. God, we're amateurs. Welcome to the Kung Fu Podcast, everybody. My name's James Still, and I'm here with my my teacher, the old man himself, Steve Newby. Hi, Steve.
Hi. A grasshopper. I did used to call you that, didn't I? I used to call you grasshopper all the time.
Yeah.
Because you used to refer to me as old man, even when I wasn't old.
Oh, yeah. Well.
Now you've got a good excuse, I guess.
Do you know what? I was just watching, talking about Kung Fu, the Shaolin and all that. I was watching just a YouTube video about these two white Caucasian guys going off to Shaolin to train in real Kung Fu. And
now?
Yeah,
in
now,
today's world.
Yeah, in today's world, yeah. And oh my God. They were just doing wheelbarrows down the road, like you know when someone holds your legs and you run.
Yeah.
And they were crawling down the steps and everything. I think they were doing everything but Kung Fu. It was like that.
Yeah.
But talking about YouTube, do you remember that video of me being kicked across the room by Scott Atkins?
Yeah.
Someone took that channel down,
Oh, right.
So the video's gone.
Oh, that's a shame.
Well, it had like 2.5 million views.
That's probably why they took it down.
Do you know? Yeah. Well, the best.
Maybe Scott wanted commission.
Maybe. Actually, I think it was his site, one of his sites, but he must have cancelled it. But I was gutted because all the comments. Oh my God, the trolls on that. Oh my God.
They don't get it, do they? They really don't get it.
No, but all it was like, look at that guy fly. Look at him hold the pad. Oh, he's useless. Oh, this, that, and the other. It was great.
They didn't see the way. Most people don't recognise. I mean, they think half of the things that. For instance, you just mentioned the Shaolin monks.
Yeah.
When they're banging sticks around them, and when they're building up this chi, which we talked about last time, and so on. And when they're banging things over their head. And I went to Shaolin with the BKFA in 2001, it was. Yeah. And we watched a demonstration of the Shaolin monks. Yeah. And they were doing things like sticking cups on their stomach and sort of making it kind of impossible to pull off because of the suction and that. I don't know what that meant. I don't know if they were trying to suggest that chi was making that cup stick or what.
Maybe they were thirsty. Maybe they wanted a cup of tea.
And then one of the guys comes over and he goes, you got to punch this monk. And he volunteers to punch this monk. And Jason Crabtree got up, one of my fellow guardians, and he got up to help. And the guy says, "You have to punch him in the chest, And Jason looked at him. He went, "Really? Are you sure?" And he said, "Okay." So he just, the guy braced himself and everything as if he was going to take this impact. Yeah. And Jason punched him, and he must have shot across the room about 10 feet. Just went flying.
Oh God!
Jason. He's got a bit of an ego. Bless him. He's a lovely guy, and he weren't going to do it like half-heartedly.
No.
He wanted him to punch him, so he punched him.
Thing is, I bet they were expecting just another tourist, weren't they?
Well, exactly. They just, I guess, they expected him not to be capable of punching, and I guess that's pretty much the same across the board with a lot of martial arts. Maybe they expected him to break his wrist when he hit his stomach or something. I don't know. Yeah. But that's a typical example. And when Scott kicked you, you could see him setting it up. You can watch it if you ever got a chance to see the video. These trolls should listen closely. The guy set you up. Basically, you're holding the pad where you believed he was kicking, and of course he's kicking towards the centre of the pad, constantly practicing several times.
He was just practicing several times. Of the pad,
that's right. And then when he actually did the kick, he kicked it right at the top of the pad, and that wasn't a mistake. That was specifically to completely throw you out, and kick you backwards. And the whole point was to make you go backwards, because you were bracing yourself for a kick to the stomach, and he just kicked a lot higher. The center of gravity was much higher. Where he kicked you, you wouldn't have been able to stand there. You would have at least gone back a little bit, the very least. And there you go.
I always wanted to be an astronaut, and I got pretty close that day. But oh my God! But the trolls were brilliant. I mean, it got so bad that I ended up actually trolling myself at one point. I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. They're obviously right. Anyway, we must press on. I've got some. I've actually written down some questions this week.
This is the fourth one we've done, and this is the first time you've ever wrote down questions.
Yeah, well, we were winging it before, but I figured I'll make the effort for our fans, or probably fan who's out there. Some person all alone, in a dark room, just rocking back and forward, listening to you drone on, but
banging his head against the wall. Oh no.
Right, yeah. So. What was I going to say? Yes, got a question for you. So the other day, I was listening to one of your former students on a podcast on YouTube. Great guy, really like him. Won't throw out names, but anyway, during the course of this podcast, he was talking about almost like the mysticism in martial arts, right? So, for example, he mentioned sort of outdoor students as opposed to indoor students, as opposed to closed door students, right? And it got me thinking. I was thinking, what's going to be your take on this? So my question to you is, as Westerners studying Kung Fu, do you think we are chasing the mysticism of martial arts as opposed to actually chasing, martial arts, as in, just the ability to hit someone, not get hit or whatever. Do you know what I mean by the mysticism?
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned earlier two people on YouTube going to Shaolin to train real Kung Fu. We already know that Shaolin had been closed and destroyed for hundreds of years. We know that it has been rebuilt, and we know that a lot of the occupants of that area, the people who lived in that area, have been moved to make way for the tourist trade in that area. We know that people regard that as the Mecca, and they still see it as a mystical place, whereas we also know that there are no traditional monks there. We know that these people, although they've devoted their time to that, the pursuit, if you like, it's most definitely not the pursuit that the original monastery was designed for, and actually housed over the period of hundreds and hundreds of years. So that's one way that people tend to try to go back into history and try to relive history, if you like. Unfortunately, you can't really live in a world where with mystique and all these traditional stories and these traditional values and so on, and the animal kind of systems, and try to if you like, what's the word, emulate these kind of people in those days. We are not old mystic.
You always told me that there's no secrets in Kung Fu.
Well,
do you know
that's right. Yeah. But the thing is, you see, I think in all martial arts, certainly over the 70s and the 80s, before YouTube and before all these things were really, plugged, if you like, there were an awful lot of people that could get away with, all sorts of stuff. And unfortunately, they have students, right? And those students have got students and so on. Yeah. And so those kind of approaches to martial arts have survived to a degree, and of course a lot of them have been found out, if you want, and they kind of still exist. They've gone underground, if you like, and so there are still people that are going to find these individuals who maybe are trying to seek that kind of martial art, if you want to call it a martial art. They're trying to seek that kind of lifestyle, I want to be a tree and all that kind of thing, and they see it as a possibility that it still exists. No, it really is a very fine line between complete stupidity and people who just want to have a good life, maybe do a bit of yoga. But martial arts is about fighting. We know that, okay? We know that there was a pursuance with the monks, that there should not be. It isn't violent and so on. But no one wants to be violent. But you have to meet sometimes a force with a credible defense, with a credible force. Yeah. And that's what martial arts is. But it's got to be credible. And when you sometimes watch people on YouTube today, and there's a guy that's, I don't know where he is, in Australia or something like that, and they're trying to do this, where they do these things where they try to stop people without actually touching them. Have you seen that one?
On the beach,
yeah,
when she runs at the guy.
She runs at him and just bangs straight down. She nearly kills her. And then he pretends to go into some kind of fit as if she did that to him.
Yeah, just totally taken away from the fact that he just knocked this woman out.
How stupid!
That was crazy.
And then and then I've seen someone else sitting on their knees, like kind of a little challenge where, he's doing all this kind of, I don't know what he's trying to do, but this guy is slapping the crap out of him. Why is he trying to do that? And why do these people? We've got that video, haven't we, on YouTube, on our site, where it's that Irish guy is talking about all these kinds of martial arts. And I think that's brilliant, and it really is good. Highly recommended watching.
Going back to talking about the mysticism, if you like, in Kung Fu, what do you think about, in modern times, referring back to the 5 animals of Shaolin? And we'll just stick to the 5 animals of Shaolin, because there is a monkey, the eagle, the friggin' panther, bear, God
praying mantis.
There you go. But people have sort of added. But I'm just talking about the 5 Shaolin animals. The tiger, leopard, snake, crane, and dragon. When we look at that in a modern context, doesn't that just seem a bit weird in today's sort of? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But you've got to understand that the China of that time was different to, what the West is like now, and so they would have had a particular approach to martial arts in that time, and emulating animals and the spirit of that kind of animal, tenacity for the tiger and so on, and stealth for the leopard or the snake, and that kind of it's a way of describing a type of attack or a type of defense or a style, if you want to use that word. And yes, these are genuinely historically written accounts of these kind of animal kind of systems, if you want, categorized in that way in Shaolin, or in the people that taught and trained at Shaolin, and of course those have continued through, and they add to the mysticism, if you like, of martial arts. But in the West, to be frank, I think they're kind of lost. People want to hold on to them, and it is great to hold on to your history, and I agree with it, but you've got to make sense of it, and you can't just hold on to the name, oh, this is tiger style, or this is dragon style. You can't just hold on to that name and make noises and movements like you think you're a tiger, and then expect that to be a complete and perfect self-defense, because it isn't going to be. The concepts of animals work, but only when you interpret what these people were trying to do, and you can see the shapes of the kind of dance-like moves that these people in those days were trying to pursue. But you've got to understand what they were for, and then really apply them.
But I mean,
have a reality check, basically. I'm not saying they didn't work, because of course they did, but it's just the way people were taught in those days. I'll give you an example. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
In this country, we were taught before people could read and write.
In which country? Because you're in Canada.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
What country are you talking about?
Yeah, in the West.
All right, okay.
And I can only talk in for the UK, because I spent most of my life in the UK, of course. We were taught before we could read and write in 13th, 14th century, whatever. Talking French, by the way, till the 13th century. We were talking in rhyme, okay?
Right.
Because there were no commas, there were no full stops. There's nothing like that, so people tended to talk in rhyme and in sentence, but they created nursery rhymes too, specifically to tell stories and to explain, phenomena. And this is exactly the same as what they did in China, but they used mystical creatures, etc., etc., as they did to some degree in the West and in Europe particularly. So what you have is things like nursery rhymes like Ringa Ringa Roses, which obviously explains about the Black Death.
Oh, don't mention the Black Death at this point in time.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So we talk, but we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And neither do the Chinese. They may do it at Shaolin so they can sell their product.
Yeah.
But it isn't necessary. It isn't a necessary ingredient to learn martial arts now. And you can see that because of the success of kickboxing and other martial arts styles that have kind of developed over the last few years.
Yeah.
Of course we can always turn and say, well, wait a minute, those martial arts are a product of old martial arts, and the only difference really we can say is the modern kind of approach to martial arts has taken out all of that mysticism,
right?
Because they don't agree with it, and that's a fair point. But
no, you cannot agree with it, but I think you can appreciate. I mean, you always told me sort of kung fu is history, philosophy, and technique. Amongst other things, you've told me. You've filled me head with loads of stuff. But when you look at that history, philosophy, and technique, you kind of think, well, okay, I understand that the Shaolin systems were based on the movements of 5 animals, not just the movements, because we're talking about the spirit as well. But when you look at these, say, if you look at the hand shape of, say, a tiger's claw, for example, just using that, in today's world, you go, right, well, what is a tiger's claw? It's just a way of orientating your hand, isn't it? Just to maybe tear at something, strike at something, etc. So it's the shape of the hand, not necessarily within the context of it's a tiger's claw. So or leopard's paw. Look at how thin and utilitarian it is for fitting in sort of like throat strikes and stuff like that. So they have meanings, but when you start associating names with them, like tiger's claw, leopard's paw, all the rest of it, it sounds a bit more esoteric, and it just sounds a bit more false. You speak to a boxer, I'm just throwing a punch. And not that I, think boxing is the ultimate. I'm just saying in terms of like, if you want a reality check or if you want to just simplify it in that way, sure,
But that's what modernization has done, is just simply simplified it. They've taken out the techniques that they don't particularly see as necessary, not just because they think, a punch is the fastest thing. I mean, let's face it, some of these modern martial arts will of course do finger strikes, but they won't necessarily do, a grab at the face with all the fingers. They won't call it a tiger's claw or anything. But they may use it, but they won't call it that, simply because they've tried to separate themselves from that mysticism, if you want. But it doesn't mean to say that it doesn't work. Of course it works. All they've done is they've cut away at the whole, and they've sort of pointed themselves in a specific direction. But of course, not only have they taken those things out to separate themselves from the mysticism, but necessity, because they've had to wear gloves. So when you wear gloves, you can't particularly do a leopard's paw or a tiger's claw. You're just not going to do it. So those type of techniques are going to become extinct, if you want, from those particular groups of people.
Right.
And of course, what we're in the business of, if you want, is trying to maintain those historical movements, because yes, of course they work, but the fighting environment and the fighting style, if you will, is a totally different kind of environment to the sport aspect that their kind of modernization has taken them to. Because you have to think of the financial value for people that have created these things. They've not only created a form of fighting, if you want, which is a simplified form of fighting, but they've done it specifically so A, a crowd can understand it, and B, a crowd can actually turn up to watch it, because it's going to last longer with gloves on than it would if you had no gloves and you were poking each other in the eye. It just, it's a I don't know, it's completely and utterly relaxed. No, that's not the right word. I would say it's just made it safer. If fighting can be safe, it's made it safer. In a real world where someone is behind you, suddenly tries to cut your throat, and you've got the skills to know he's there, to feel him, and to be able to maneuver yourself so that you are controlling that knife hand and at the same time being able to find an opening, then that's what it was designed for. But of course, you've also got to consider that these people may have been wearing armor. So there are many techniques that you may be able to use to get through those chinks of armor, like a finger crossed over another finger, like you were wishing, that kind of technique, and so on, and pointed fingers, like if you put all your fingers together with your thumb underneath. We see that, what people call that is some people call it like a praying mantis type of look, and some people call it like a crane's type of beak, but there was a weapon that you would hold in there, which would be like a ring to stop it going into your fingers, and a spike. So you would have a kind of a part of a spike as the handle inside your fingers, with a ring at the end of your fingers touching your finger points, and then you would have the point continuing out, so it would be a very small weapon, and you could do that stealthily, because there's an awful lot of assassination, an awful lot of people out there after power, if you want. So in that kind of environment, there was an awful lot of nasty stuff going on, and people think today's world is violent and so on. Yes, it's violent if you walking around with guns and stuff like that, because it makes martial arts kind of
null and void, really, doesn't
it? So for that reason, you could say it's a more violent world, because technology has taken over that skill. But in those days, you had to know how to protect yourself, or at any point in time someone could be close enough to lay you out, and that would be it. Whether or not they have a weapon, and most of the time they would. But what if you didn't? You see, the definition of the capability of using a weapon is having it at hand, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the weapon at hand, the weapon is useless to you.
Yeah, right.
Hence the reason sticks, poles, quans, whatever you want to call them, 6-foot poles, eyebrow poles, whatever you want to call them, became a pretty mandatory weapon, because you could walk around in any society legally. They wouldn't, they might stop you walking around with a sword, because they fear you may try to assassinate someone or attack someone or rob someone or whatever. So those kind of laws existed a long time before, the UK banning knives. It's simple as that. But go on.
Going back to sort of the mysticism, interpretation of martial arts by Westerners, if you're saying that sort of Western culture generally has simplified martial arts, so we've got things like kickboxing, boxing, doesn't that sort of answer my own question, really? Like, because if the mysticism was prevalent, surely we would still be training like that instead of doing a lot more boxing, kickboxing, etc.
No, it's just easier. It's easier, and remember, we're talking about promotion as well. Where people can make a lot of money from promoting big events, sporting events. You make a lot of money. You got a lot of money to promote your schools, and if you promote your schools, like that. I mean, look at Taekwondo as an example, for God's sake. Although it does do competition, it does competition within its own organisations, and it was there's very few Taekwondo guys who actually initially were allowed at all to go to other events. They kept it in house. But they built Taekwondo to such an extent that they were able to create a very large business of martial arts, if you want. And so that's an example of keeping things in-house, but making money from promotion of competitions, even within your own membership groups. But taking that aside, you've also got the family members and the friends and so on who are going to come and pay to watch an event such as that. That's where all the money comes from. That's how musicians make their money today. They make less music on records or recording music, and they actually do far more events, far more concerts, simply because of the fact that you can sell all sorts of memorabilia and items, and of course tickets to see the concert. So, and they put on a big show, and martial arts does exactly the same thing. In that context, traditionalism doesn't. Remember, traditionalism had to fight the stigma of the traditionalists previous to them. I mean, Bruce Lee's a good example. How he had to fight the stigma of Chinese people in America not wanting him to teach kung fu. So you can imagine that tenfold or 1,000-fold or 1,000,000-fold in China, where no, you can't use. So it's secret. So they utilize that secret. They sell things in a totally different way. Like in kickboxing, they'll go, come on, and kickboxing is brilliant, it'll beat everybody, and come and watch a competition and you'll see what I mean. And then in traditional martial arts, they'll say, you're the only one that's going to learn this secret. Right? And so they sell it for much more to the one individual pays for private lessons and thinks that he's the only one learning it.
But doesn't that strike a chord with a lot of people wanting to learn kung fu like this? I'm going to learn the master's secrets and all the rest of it. Like,
It
do you know
does.
What I mean? When I first started, it really appealed to me. But then I'm afraid you destroyed all my conceptions of martial art. So thanks for that. You watch Karate Kid or whatever, and you think, oh, it's a lovely this, that, and the other, the master, and for better or worse, we've had a interesting relationship, you and I. And I always sort of equated that to It's a very personal thing to me, like our relationship. But
Yeah.
you know, it was never going to be that, was it? It was never going to be like the master student in the old sense of the word, because
because that guy had a few cars, so he obviously
that's true.
He obviously had a few quid, Mr. Miyagi.
Mind you, I did wax oil under your Land Rover, and I was wondering where the martial application was in that.
Yeah. Well, you had to avoid the drips before they got in your eye. You had to try to avoid the rust. That was my plan.
Oh, was
As
it?
the rust fell down to your eyes, you had to quickly slip away.
There you go.
And that was how you was able to learn these stealthy, parries and
See,
ducks
I
and
knew
dives.
it. There was something to it. There was something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Plus,
go
of
on.
course, if the jack had collapsed, you'd have been able to try some qigong with the chest. So I did my best to teach you in the most traditional way.
There you go. Peter first, sand the floor.
Yeah. So yes, it was a nice concept, Mr. Miyagi and whatever his name was.
Daniel-san.
Daniel-san. Yeah, that was a really nice concept. Awful martial arts, but a great
Oh,
concept.
it was lousy.
And when we went to this, we did a summer course, the British Kung Fu Association, and it was in Windermere, and we had the cinema to ourselves to watch the first Karate Kid. I think it was the first Karate Kid film, and we had the whole cinema to ourselves. About 120 of us all got a private showing of Karate Kid, and everybody was jumping up and screaming, every time he scored a point and so on.
Oh wow!
all tongue in cheek. It was great. It was good fun. Great day.
What's scraping in the background? I'm hearing something scraping. Something scraping. I don't know. Going back to mysticism, because that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on internal and external martial arts?
That's a Western concept.
Okay.
Chinese are quite confused by the fact that we try to categorize it as internal or external.
Right.
Because
Give us an example. Give everyone listening an example.
Well, people say that Tai Chi is an internal style.
Right.
People say that Lao Gao is an external style, but they've got, both of them have got internal and external components. In Tai Chi, for instance, you'll roll your punch, you'll do a rolling punch, you'll do a straight punch. Are you going to do that slowly? Are you going to do that internally? No, the power is developed internally, so it's slowed down, but you still have to do it fast in order to make it work, which makes it an external style. So there is no internal and external, because all genuine martial arts have both. So that was just another one of these make all men masters, divide and conquer.
Right.
That's simple. So if you can turn around and say, well, my style's better than your style, and I'm the master of this style, and then the other guy goes, well, I'm the master of this style, I'm not going to tell you all my secrets, then you've separated people and you've made them subservient to you.
Yeah.
Because they
Are you not just talking about the physical side of it? I mean, I want to talk as well as the physical side of internal and external. Obviously, you've just said, they're one and the same. But what about the internal side of it? The sort of meditative aspect to it, and things like that. I mean, aren't they internal? And
well, again, all styles, genuine styles, do things like meditation, qigong, and so on. They all do exercises that are meant to be improving of your health.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if you're not healthy, you can't fight.
Yeah.
So in those days, they would have done exercises to maintain their health. Today, you just take additives. You take a bit of powder, or you stay clean.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to get as ill today as you did then, because you're going to be immune from certain things because of the drugs that you've been given when you're a child, injections and everything.
Yeah.
But also, of course, you're well aware of hygiene.
Yeah.
You're well aware of the cause of diseases, and you are literally aware of that diseases exist.
Yeah.
Where in those days they had no idea that happened. So, you know, you would have to go to someone who had some understanding of the anatomy if you were injured to prevent an illness taking place, you know, sepsis or anything else that would, you know, or a deformed joint that you couldn't fix because you didn't have the money to go to any quack or any practitioner of medicine. And the majority of people in those days were the martial arts masters who knew those things, because they would have been surrounded by people that were constantly injuring each other, and they would have learned those things.
Did Master Yao once set someone's bone or something?
Master Yao had his own clinic at one stage in Birmingham.
Right.
In fact, myself and a good friend of mine, Martin, Martin's an electrician, and we went to open his. When he started his clinic, we were the only two people that turned up to help him clear it out, set it up, and so he started it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I was driving a truck at the time, and when he did he had a company that made the uniforms. Yeah. And when he decided to move from one place to another, I turned up with a 32-ton truck to get rid of all his stuff. Yeah, so I helped him get rid of all his stuff for free. Took it down the tip.
Brilliant! Oh, that's the good.
Yeah,
but didn't he set someone's bone at one point at the competition or something? I can't.
Oh, he did that regularly. He used to help fix joints and so on. I mean, he taught us how to do it. We were able to. I fixed people's toes and fingers, and people dislocated things, shoulder. We did a demonstration in Chinese New Year. Me and a girl called Jo, along with a few other people doing different things, forms and so on. We did a self-defense situation.
Is she the one who kicked you in the canal?
That's right, on the video.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah, that's
something
Joe
like
Hodgkiss.
Steve Newby
and Joe Hodgkiss.
Yeah, that's right.
She's changed her name. She changed her name.
Right. So go on. Sorry, you were doing a demo.
We're doing a demo, and we'd rehearsed it obviously quite a lot. We did a lot of rehearsals for these demonstrations, and we were in the crowd of at the Chinese New Year in the centre, in the Arcadian in Birmingham shopping centre, and there was a part of the demo when she was knocked to the ground, as part of the demonstration, and I grabbed her arm and I pulled her, and as I pulled her arm, I took it out of a socket.
Never.
I took it straight out. I pulled it out of its. I pulled it out of, because she wasn't she was a petite girl.
Yeah.
And I pulled it out of its socket, and she you could see it in her face. She was in agony. A shoulder was out of its socket. She turned around and she started doing everything left-handed. Right. Wow. And we completed the whole. Both of us. I realised something had happened because she was doing it with the wrong hand every time. Each of the additional techniques, and I went with the flow, and because we rehearsed so much, we were able to do it completely on the opposite side. And when we'd finished, of course, she came straight to me. She says, my shoulder's dislocated. And we went to Master Yao. He was there with us, and he just put her arm over his shoulder, and pulled it back into position. And that was it. And then from then on, and of course, when you dislocate your shoulder, it tends to be weak for a long time. Yeah. And she tended to dislocate it. She dislocated a couple more times during other training, and I was able to put it back for her. And I put people's fingers back and so on. Yeah. But you can't do these things anymore.
No.
You're not allowed to do these things anymore. So Master Yao, consequently, his clinic was closed. Yeah. He had 2 doctors working for him doing acupuncture. Wow. And he did the bone manipulations and so on. Yeah. And it was a shame, because you talk about mysticism, you talk about all the amazing things that history provides in the sense of kung fu, and the way people see it, how mystical it is and so on. But what they forget is the practical uses of martial arts include a practical way of repairing a damaged body, and that's been lost too.
Well, like
So
you,
people-
like you said, the first thing you do when you studied a martial art all those years ago was go and find a formula to make ointment.
A recipe. Yeah, he would give you a recipe. Your master would give you a recipe. You would go off. You would learn you would go find all the ingredients to that recipe. He would show you how to make that recipe, and that would become your dit da jiao.
Yeah.
That would become your medicine when you got bruises, and where you strained a joint. Overstretched a joint or whatever, and it also helped to harden your skin in your hands and your knuckles as well.
What do you think in this modern day and age validates a martial artist? Because I mean, I'm Laogar through and through. Like that's all I've studied. The only thing I've ever studied in my life. I love it to bits, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not that bothered about doing meditation or the Qigong or stuff like that. All I'm primarily sort of interested in, and it doesn't mean I don't have an interest in learning sort of theory and all the rest of it about it, but predominantly for me, martial arts is a physical thing. But obviously I understand that the physical and the mental sort of bridge each other. All right, I get that, because it has changed me sort of mentally as well. But you know where I'm going with this. Like, I would just prefer to just do my sets, do my fighting, do some weaponry, all the rest of it, and maybe not so much on the meditation. Like, does that invalidate my learning of the style?
No, it doesn't. It means that you're learning the one thing that people can't take away. Okay, eventually they might try to. I mean, let's face it, today with litigation, if you try to teach people in the way that you would have taught people a long time ago, forcing them into certain positions, forcing them into doing actions that are, possibly dangerous.
Right.
I mean, fighting, for instance. Yeah. You get people involved in that, certainly, and they get injured by another student because the student can't control themselves. That's your responsibility. And so, yes, in that sense, they can even take that kind of training away from you. But they have taken the medicinal point of view. You can't practice medicine without being specifically taught by, a college or a university or a clinic with that sense. There are a few of the Guardians, Keith Thomas, Cole Jones and that, who have that kind of opportunity, and they've learned these things and they have their own clinic, or at least Keith does. There may be others, but it's something that they pursued. They had to pursue it through different channels to learning it off a master. Although they may have got information and anecdotes, the only way they're going to be qualified is through the proper channels, unfortunately. So that's gone, and so and obviously all the mysticism is just, it's what people make of it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I always thought with like Chinese medicine and everything, like, we're in England. Where the hell am I going to find a Chinese herb? Do you know what I mean? So if you're going to learn some sort of healing, art or whatever you want to call it, with herbal remedies and stuff, you go out in the English countryside and pick sort of plants that are native here, and so a lot of our, do you know what I mean? Just like, does it? Oh yeah,
there's a lot of herbs in Europe that are very strong for medicinal purposes, and a lot of people also that know about them get Culpeper's
what?
There's a guy called Culpeper. He was a guy who wrote a book on herbal medicine and so on. Although a lot of people will say many of his medicines and many of his remedies were actually useless, but that's probably the same with a lot of things, which is why you get old wives' tales. But many of these old wives' tales and remedies are actually very, very good for you. I mean, looking at honey, looking at garlic, looking at onion, these things are amazing. Put a bit of onion between your toes for athlete's foot. Put a bit of garlic or onion and some honey down your throat when you've got a cold. I mean, I was on a summer course with one of my students, well, several of my students, but this one student had bought his girlfriend, and she was well into this kind of thing, and we had it was in Windermere or in the north, in the Lake District, and it was constantly raining, this mystic rain, and everyone was getting a cold, and she made me a brew of herbs from just by the side of the tent, and I tell you what, it tasted amazing as well. It was really nice. It was a herbal brew, it was a tea, and it was made from the plants around the campsite, and it was great. And now I don't know if it did anything. I just like the taste. but there are herbs everywhere. They're still discovering them, aren't they? But I'm afraid there's plenty of Chinese people in Chinese markets and so on in England now.
Oh yeah,
in the UK.
I get that. I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm just saying aren't we? If we're talking about traditional Chinese medicine and being a healer and all that,
Well, I got my Da Jiao from Keith, thanks to Keith Thomas, and he was kind enough to send me the recipe as well. When I came to Canada, I couldn't obviously bring the remedy with me, so he was kind enough to send me the complete recipe. So I've still got that, which is great.
Yeah. No, I did. I wanted to talk about this mysticism thing, because I don't want to ever feel like my training is less kung fu-y than some other person, who's training, what they think is a traditional art with all this meditation and stuff. Do you know what I mean? I have meditated once. And that was at the summer course, by the way, in 2005. And I'm not joking. I was walking in the Sahara Desert.
Really?
Honest to God. I looked around. All I could see was desert, and I was on top of a dune. And it was as clear as I'm, looking at my computer screen now. It was crazy.
You wasn't asleep with your shoulder leaning.
No,
you was asleep, and your head was leaning on top of a ginger-haired kid.
No, I swear to God, I was walking in the desert. It was the weirdest thing. I was like Lawrence of Arabia or something, It was weird.
Right.
It was weird. But no, that's the only time that I've ever experienced that. And that was in summer course in 2004.
Well, all I have to say about whether or not your martial art is less than someone else's is when you look at these people who have tried to maintain traditional values but completely misunderstand the fighting values or the technical prowess of Kung Fu as the martial art as it is, a martial art. Remember this, martial has an awful lot of emphasis in that art, and so if your style works, and we already know it does, not only from your own conquests, not only from your own training, and remember we were talking about what's his name, Big Flad or wherever last week, last podcast. So not only from that kind of example, but it's Lao Guard in general has proved itself time and time again and throughout the world for 30 years. No other martial art, no other Kung Fu style, if you like, Chinese martial art, has ever been able to conceive that except within their own organization. They fight within their own organization to their own rules. Now Lao Guard has gone out and it has displayed its prowess and destroyed so many other martial arts reputations because of its adaptation of its traditional style and values, and the mentality has got to be part of that. Your mental attitude has got to be in the right place.
But the proliferation of Lao Gar now, let's face it, is on the decline. I mean, when you look at all the martial arts, I can just talk about the UK, but you look at every other person is doing MMA or whatnot. So if
that is it is an issue that I've many of us have struggled to try to correct that, but it doesn't matter what you do. Unfortunately, the powers that be are in a mind to think inwardly, and it's not what we do that matters or what we don't do that matters. It's what everyone else around us is doing, and if we don't follow that, then the style will become a lot less popular, if you like.
Yeah.
Not the style itself, but our organisation, or the organisation, the British Kung Fu Association, simply because of the fact that people will continue to train the style, but unfortunately, in many cases, it will become nothing more than a shadow of what it should be.
Yeah.
Most people that train it outside of the British Kung Fu Association have very little understanding of it anyway, not because they didn't learn the style, but because they didn't understand the style.
You're talking about the sort of the technical subtlety of for example, let's just use the forms, the sets, all the rest of it, just as one minor example. But like you always say to me, like when something becomes very difficult for these I don't know what you want to call them, masters or whatever, they always revert to what's easiest for them to teach, e.g. kickboxing, for example. And I'm not saying that kickboxing is a lesser thing, not at all. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to lose anything within a traditional martial art, surely the first thing to go is what you don't understand. And if we're talking about the sets and applications of them, or sticking hands, or whatever, or weaponry, surely that's going to go.
That's right, and it does. And it does, and even with some traditional styles that still profess to teach traditional style, they have lost their weaponry, or they have lost their directions in terms of what the value of their forms are. They and you so many times you hear the ideology of we only teach what works. Everything works if you understand it. It wouldn't have been taught for thousands of years before you learned it if it didn't work, right? So it's going to work. So all you've got to do is make it work right now, but you've got to train it first. And the problem is, of course, they don't train it because they think, well, I'm not going to bother with that because it don't work. But as we already know, there are so many ways of using one particular technique. Not every one of those ways is going to work for you, but one of them will. The whole purpose of that technique is to work, and the whole purpose of you learning it is to make it work. So a young girl is going to use a technique totally different to a big guy, a small girl. So they start using power, of course, and they start like devising some form of power, which we talked about in the last podcast about the big guy coming to the club. But the person who's always going to be strongest, if you had a woman and a man, a small woman and maybe a 6-foot guy who getting on the same bus every day, going to the training, and they trained in a concept of power, if you like, then the man is always going to be more powerful. Just simply, it's just gravity. It's just simply the momentum. It's his size. It's his strength, and so on. But of course, if then they are able to train a style that is based on speed, then who's going to be the fastest? The woman is always going to look faster because she's got a shorter distance to travel, but she has to use technique in order to close that distance because the guy's got more range. However, if she's got the speed and she's got the ability and the technique and the stealth to be able to do that, and the right timing, she can do it just as easily as the other guy that's a big guy. And to some extent she'll be better off because she can get closer. She can still fight with a good range for her closer, whereas the other guy is going to find it difficult once she's inside that, and he's going to start trying to make his distance. He's going to start trying to back off. It's if she's violent enough, if aggressive enough. I should use the word aggressive, not violent, because it's not violence.
Isn't it so important though to have like a socially diverse class in martial arts? Or I don't know, is socially diverse the right word? Is it physically diverse? Or
it is.
I don't know.
Well, both. Both matter, because if you're a small guy, okay, you're going to be training against a lot of big guys, which basically works for you, hopefully. And it's a lot easier for you to understand the technique because you have to be good at the technique. If you're a very big guy, however, you tend to fall back on your energy all the time. You tend to fall back on your power, and you go, well, I don't need this kind of technique because I'm bigger than this guy. But it's different when you start seeing skill, and that skill starts overtaking your ability to recognize it or to contain it with your power. So that's what it's about. You've got to maintain that skill in the martial art. You've got to maintain the martial art itself, the techniques, and often people give that up so that they can, just simply, throw punches at each other and may the best man win. And remember that in kickboxing, it's weight categorized. Mostly today. So within a certain range, you're going to have the same kind of weight category fighting you in a contest. So whether they're short, tall, whatever, doesn't make any difference. It's still the same weight category.
Do you think that in general, like Lao in I don't know, certainly in the early days, in its heyday, you had so many different people, statures, sizes, compared to, say, for example, I'm going to say Taekwondo, which, as we sort of generally can know, is generally quite tall people with long limbs, hence the kicking, so it benefits those. You look at judo, a lot of the time it's short, stocky guys because they can throw people over the hips, etc.
Well, when we talk about that, we're talking. We're generalizing, of course, because you could get a short, fat guy doing Taekwondo. Of course, you can.
I've seen him.
In general,
can't punch.
In general, the successful athletes are people that measure up to the kind of tendencies for that style, which tend, like Taekwondo as an example, tend to be quite flexible. If they are going to do those kicks, they're going to have to become flexible. So if your mother is a lap dancer, you're likely to be pretty good at Taekwondo. However, if she was a garbage collector, a bin man, then she might not.
I don't know. What's sexier?
She might not be so flexible. So it's it's just the way it is. It's you become flexible and you're able to succeed in doing the techniques. Then again, in judo, if you're a tall guy, you're kind of not going to have the center of gravity you require compared to a shorter guy who will be more successful at throwing you. So yes, you can be successful, there's no doubt about that, but as a whole, generalizing, it's a body form or a body shape that tends to be more successful in those kind of styles. So if you do jiu-jitsu as an example, take a look at them. They're bloody big guys in general. Certainly in the early days, big guys who can hold you down longer than you could hold them down, and they're able to, throw you about, but they're also able to hold you down because the whole thing is, lying on the floor.
Do you think in today's world you get more of a sort of a passive person learning kung fu rather than an overly aggressive, not aggressive, but someone who's up for a fight sort of thing? I mean, look, I've been to a boxing gym just to check it out, and the one thing I always think about boxing gyms is you've got sort of like a spit and sawdust mentality in them. Do you know what I mean? It's like people want to go there, they want to throw punches, they want to fight. But in general, like in a lot of the kung fu classes, or martial art classes in general, but we're talking kung fu, you get a sort of a more passive person wanting to train. Do you agree with that?
think possibly. I think when you're talking about the mental attitude of people, I think a boxing club is a really good way of seeing how that is utilized, how you can create the mentality of people. But you're not trying to make them crazy. You're trying to control. Not control is the wrong word. You're trying to define their abilities and shall we say, harness that attitude, harness that mentality, and that's what you're doing for a sport. And obviously they need a mental attitude in order to participate in that sport, just as the same as you need to harness someone's mentality and develop someone's mentality. If you was going to send them to war, you need to discipline them so that they will just go you know, if you say jump, they say how high. They don't go bugger off, do it yourself.
Oh, that's where I went wrong. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Well, hang on.
Yes.
You want me to walk in the middle of a desert so that people can shoot me?
It, yeah.
Just to be a target, just to ferret out the enemy. Oh no, I'm on. I didn't obviously say that, but you know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, idiots.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, but with other martial arts, I guess, that haven't kind of harnessed the mentality of competitive fighting, or you know, even sometimes they haven't even harnessed any kind of fighting. They have no real concept or understanding of the mental requirement for fighting, where you have to put yourself at risk, where you you know, you have to train.
Well, you look at Laugar back in the early days in the 70s, obviously way before my time, but you know, I think it was around about your time, wasn't it?
Where's my mute button? I need to cough.
It's the green thing. It's the green one. I was going to say, you look at Laugar in the 70s compared to Laugar now.
By the way, did you hear me cough then?
No, I didn't know. That was really...
that's it.
You worked technology. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
But very briefly, because we've got to wrap up in a minute or so, but I was just going to say, like, you look at Laugar back in the 70s compared to what it is now, and it almost seems to me is that you had a more motivated type of person that wants to go out and do the fighting, etc. Not that I think the fighting is just purely what Laugar is. Of course, it's a major important part of it, like the history of the competition fighter. But it's you know, certainly times have changed. That's what I'm saying. Is that for the worse or for the better?
Oh no. Well, it's for the worse, because it is a sad fact that mitigation and litigation, whatever, has been. Yeah, it's a major part for martial arts. Insurance is necessary. Restrictions on training are absolutely necessary. And it's so different. I mean, we would go, when we were training, we would go in the hallway and just to do the fighting while the class was going on. Sometimes we never even went to the class because we just did the fighting, that's all. But there were no pads, there were no, you know, we used to have things later on which we tend to refer to them as oven gloves, which kind of looked like oven gloves, but they were very small, tiny weeny things that you barely just about covered your knuckles, and you would go home with huge whelps on your body and big lumps on your arms where you'd been kicked and so on, and they'd wear their trainers as well, and so you had, you know, footprints all over your body, and it was just a really amazing experience to fight like that, because you're so close and so hyped up fighting. And then competitions were similar.
Do you think it was, obviously we've got to be really quick now, but do you think it was better back then, or is it, or compared to now, or is things just as it because things obviously evolve, right? And it you know, it doesn't mean I think personally, when you look at the skill of fighters 20 years ago to today, my God, the evolution of them is like, you know, chalk and
absolutely
cheese.
I certainly agree with that, where the equipment and so on and the rules have certainly made it a lot safer, and therefore people have been able to go at it a lot faster. You would have been a lot more guarded, and you would have been prepared to be hit a lot more. It's much the same as, you could say, an amateur boxer you know, is going to be sort of grit and everything. But then when it comes to a professional fight, they are far more guarded.
Totally. It's a
and far more protected. So and that's the way it is, really. It was very, very unprotected in those days, and now of course the protection has allowed it to become far more. Look at race car driving. In the old days, you know, they'd have made 100 miles an hour if they were lucky, and the car would have rolled on the first bend, and so people were dying everywhere. But modern times today, look at the speed of those cars. You know, pretty much 180 miles an hour. And they're well protected. If they bounce, if the wheel comes off, they'll pretty much land up standing up. You know, they'll get out standing up. Not everybody, but it is a much safer sport.
Right. Well, Steve, we're going to have to finish there. Our time's up. And you didn't. Did you mention? You didn't even mention trucking. This podcast.
I didn't know. Well, yesterday I went to. Oh crap! I don't even remember where I went.
Okay. Anyway, anyway, we've got to go, old man. So
Revelstoke.
Revelstoke.
Revelstoke is a beautiful place up towards the Rockies. From here, about 3 hours.
Yeah, I'm not jealous at all. Not jealous at all. Right, guys, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Kung Fu Podcast. My name's James Still, and as ever, I'm joined by my teacher, Mr. Steve Newby. I don't know if you want to finish with some wise words of wisdom. Steve, have you got anything in mind?
Those secrets of Kung Fu, remember those secrets that we must never tell anybody.
Pray do tell.
Yeah, well, the first one is to train hard. The second one is to train harder still. And the third one, shall I tell you? Should I tell you?
Yeah, tell us.
Okay, to train even harder still.
All right. Well, you heard it here. You heard it here. Guys,
I have given away the secrets of Kung Fu.
You have. Anyway, right, guys, we've got to go. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Say bye, Steve. Bye.
Bye.
I kick your little Beijing ass right now, man. I ain't scared of you. I know you know that little tricky shit. Come on.
Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us on the Kung Fu Podcast. If you like that and you want to find out more about us, you can head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or YouTube and find us under SJN Martial Arts. And also guys, this podcast is available on Podbean and iTunes. So, until next time, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again on the Kung Fu Podcast.
Guns. Now, why doesn't somebody pull off 45 and bang, settle it?
No guns.